What most backyard gardeners walk past every single day without once considering what it actually is. 40, 50, 60 feet of vertical growing space sitting completely idle while they're on their knees trying to squeeze one more plant into ground they've already filled. Here's what I've confirmed from testing them myself. 7 specific vining food plants can cover a standard fence panel completely post to post, top rail to ground, and be producing real harvestable food within the same summer you plant them. One of these starts giving you something to pick in 45 days. Another produces so heavily from a single plant that neighbors start asking where you're buying it. Stay with me until Vine 5, because that particular plant does something on a fence that I genuinely did not expect the first time I grew it, and once you see it, every bare fence in your neighborhood starts looking like a missed opportunity. I want to say something that completely reframes what a fence actually is, because most people see a fence as a boundary, a line marking where the garden ends. Once you start seeing it differently, everything about how you plan a backyard changes. A 6-foot fence panel that's 8 feet wide gives you 48 square feet of growing surface. Vertical square footage that gets full sun exposure because nothing grows tall enough beside it to cast a shadow on it. The kind that has air moving around it constantly, which means significantly lower disease pressure compared to crowded ground-level beds. The kind that produces from ground level all the way to head height, which means harvesting without bending once. The ground beneath that same fence panel, probably 1 to 2 square feet of usable planting space, partly shaded by the fence itself for half the day. Vines on a fence don't compete with your existing garden beds. They add production from space that was delivering nothing. Every plant I've chosen for this list was selected for one thing above everything else. They grow fast enough that a fence you planted in May looks like a food wall by August. Not next year, this year. Let's go through each one. Vine 1. Malabar Spinach. The name is slightly misleading, so let me clear that up immediately. Malabar spinach is not spinach. It doesn't taste like spinach. It doesn't grow like spinach. And it doesn't do what standard spinach does in heat, which is bolted immediately and becomes completely useless in midsummer when you most want fresh greens. Malabar spinach is a tropical vining plant from South Asia that does the exact opposite. It loves heat. The hotter the summer, the faster it grows and the more abundantly it produces. In the peak of July and August, when standard spinach has been long finished, Malabar spinach is at its most productive. Climbing a fence with stems covered in thick, glossy, deep green leaves that you pick and use anywhere you'd use cooked spinach or Swiss chard. The growth rate surprises people every time. In warm weather, once established, Malabar spinach puts on several inches of new growth per day. It climbs by twining the stems wrap around anything they can reach, including fence wire, mesh, or twine strung horizontally across the fence panels. Give it something to grab every 8 to 10 inches, and it fills the space between anchor points quickly and reliably. Plant from seed directly into the ground at the base of the fence once soil temperature is reliably above 65 degrees. Germination takes 7 to 14 days. From transplant size to your first harvest of individual leaves is around 45 to 50 days. After that first harvest, the plant branches from every point where you picked and becomes denser week by week. One plant, correctly placed at the base of a fence panel, can cover 4 to 5 feet of fence width by late summer. Pick the leaves young and tender, roughly the size of your palm, and they have a mild, very slightly slippery texture when cooked that works well in stir-fries, soups, and egg dishes. The flavor is milder than standard spinach and holds up better to cooking heat without turning bitter. The stems of young growth are edible and tender enough to use without any additional preparation. For a food wall, Malabar spinach covers vertical space faster than almost anything else on this list while producing a harvest that runs from early summer straight through to the first frost. Vine 2. Scarlet Runner Bean. If there's a vine on this list that earns its place on a fence twice over once, visually and once as food, it's the Scarlet Runner Bean. The flowers come first. Dense clusters of vivid scarlet orange flowers covering the vine from midsummer onward, attractive enough that most people who don't know what it is assume it's purely ornamental. It isn't. Those flowers are edible, mild, faintly bean-flavored, used fresh in salads or as a garnish, and directly behind each flower comes a bean pod. Scarlet Runner beans are large podded and harvested at multiple stages. Young pods, picked at 4 to 6 inches, are eaten whole, cooked like a French bean with a more robust flavor. Let the pods develop fully, and the beans inside are shelled out as large, purple-streaked fresh shell beans. Dry them completely on the vine, and you have dried beans that store for the whole year with a flavor that most commercial dried beans simply don't match. The vine is vigorous and fast. From direct seed sown at the base of a fence after the last frost date to the first flowers takes 60 to 70 days. Seeds are large enough to plant easily, which matters for gardeners whose fingers aren't what they used to be, and they germinate reliably in 5 to 10 days in warm soil. Scarlet runner beans climb by twining counterclockwise up any vertical support. Horizontal wires or twine spaced every 12 inches gives them enough to grip, and they fill from the bottom up steadily as the season progresses. They prefer slightly cooler temperatures than some other beans, which makes them particularly well suited to northern and mid-Atlantic states, where midsummer temperatures don't stay brutally high for extended periods. In mild climates, the plant is a perennial from its tuberous root. Dig the roots in autumn, store them frost-free, and replant in spring. A vine regrowing from an established tuber reaches productive size significantly faster than one started from seed. Vine 3, yard-long bean. The yard-long bean goes by several names: asparagus bean, Chinese long bean, snake bean, and the name tells you the first thing you need to know. The pods are long, genuinely long, 18 to 24 inches on average, sometimes more under good growing conditions. But the length is not the point. The point is how fast this vine produces and how continuously it does so once it gets going. Yard-long beans are heat-demanding and fast-maturing from direct seed to first harvest in 55 to 60 days in consistently warm weather. More importantly, the harvest doesn't stop. The plant produces new pods in continuous succession rather than setting a single large crop all at once. Pick the pods every 2 to 3 days during peak season, and the vine keeps flowering and setting new pods throughout summer and well into autumn. On a fence, yard-long beans need vertical support to twine up and horizontal structure to spread across as the vine lengthens. The vines are lighter and more open than Malabar spinach, which actually makes them easier to manage on a fence because you can see exactly what's happening at every point, and harvesting is completely straightforward. The pods are harvested before full maturity at 18 to 20 inches, while still tender and slightly flexible. Overripe pods become tough and fibrous quickly, which means checking the fence every 2 to 3 days during the main season. The flavor is stronger and more earthy than a standard green bean, better suited to stir-frying, braising, and longer cooking than raw eating. For a food wall, the yard-long bean earns its fence space through sheer consistent productivity. A well-established vine in full production on a sunny fence yields significantly more per plant than standard bush beans, occupying 3 times the ground space. If you've been watching this channel and you haven't subscribed yet, do that right now. Every week on Rickard Backyard Garden, there's content at exactly this level of specific, practical detail built for real backyard gardeners. Not general advice, growing information you can actually act on this season. Buttons right there. Vine 4, hyacinth bean. Most people who grow hyacinth beans grow it purely as an ornamental. The purple flowers are genuinely beautiful. The seed pods, deep burgundy purple, almost metallic looking, are among the most visually striking things in any summer garden. Bees find it before almost any other flowering vine you plant. What most people don't know, because most seed packets don't mention it, is that the young leaves, young pods, and seeds are all edible once properly prepared. The young leaves are used as a cooked green similar to Malabar spinach in how you'd use it, slightly stronger in flavor and best suited to stews and braised dishes rather than quick sautéing. Young pods, picked before they toughen, at around 2 inches long, are cooked and eaten like a standard bean. The mature seeds are dried, then boiled in multiple changes of water to remove the compounds that make them unsuitable to eat raw. The important note on preparation, and I want to be direct about this because it matters. Hyacinth beans must be cooked before eating at every stage. Raw pods and raw seeds contain compounds that cause stomach upset. Boiling removes them completely. This is not complicated, but it is non-negotiable, and any food use of this plant begins with that understanding. On a fence, hyacinth bean is one of the fastest climbers on this entire list. The vines are strong, twining enthusiastically up any vertical structure, and in warm conditions, they put on a foot or more of new growth per week at peak growing speed. A vine planted at the base of a fence panel in late spring reaches the top of a 6-foot fence before midsummer in most climates. As a food wall plant, it delivers visual impact that makes the fence look intentional and designed rather than utilitarian. For any gardener who wants a fence that looks as good as it produces, hyacinth bean delivers both simultaneously. Vine 5, Chayote. At the start of this video, I told you Vine 5 would change how you think about fence gardening. Here is exactly why. Chayote, pronounced chayote, is a perennial vining plant from Central America that produces an apple-sized, pear-shaped fruit with a single seed. You plant the entire fruit, slightly buried at an angle with the narrow end facing upward, and within 2 to 3 weeks, you have a vigorous vine pushing upward with speed and strength that is unlike almost anything else in a backyard garden. The vine can grow up to 4 inches per day in warm conditions. That is not a misprint. A well-placed chayote on a sunny fence in midsummer grows fast enough that you can see the difference from one morning to the next. By the end of the season, a single plant can cover a fence run 20 to 30 feet long and produce between 50 and 100 individual fruits. One plant, one season, 50 to 100 fruits. The fruit is mild and slightly sweet, with a texture similar to summer squash but firmer, which makes it more versatile in cooking because it holds its shape through longer cooking times. It is sliced raw in salads, roasted, braised, made into soup, and added to stews. The young shoots and leaves are also edible cooked as greens, the same way you'd use any tender vine tip. What makes chayote different from every other vine on this list? In mild climates, roughly USDA Zone 7 and above, the root system overwinters underground, and the vine regrows each spring. A chayote plant in its second and third year produces even more abundantly than its first because the established root system gives it resources a first-year plant simply doesn't have. The challenge with chayote is timing. It needs a long, warm season, ideally 5 to 6 frost-free months to produce well. In the northern United States, start the fruit indoors in a warm spot 4 to 6 weeks before your last frost date and transplant the established vine once the weather settles. That head start gives it the season length it needs to produce meaningfully in year 1. For a food wall, a single chayote on the right fence changes the entire character of that space. By late August, it will have covered more fence than the other 6 vines on this list combined, and it will be hanging with fruit that most of your neighbors have never grown and have no idea is even possible in a backyard. Vine 6, Loofah. Most people know loofah as the dried fibrous sponge sold in bath supply shops. Almost nobody knows that the same plant is a fast-growing, productive food vine whose fruits, harvested young, are a genuinely excellent edible vegetable. The fully mature, dried loofah gourd produces the sponge. That same gourd, harvested at 6 to 8 inches while still young, and the flesh is completely soft, is a culinary vegetable used across South Asian, African, and East Asian cuisines, exactly the way you'd use zucchini or summer squash. The flavor is mild and slightly sweet. The texture holds up well to heat and absorbs the flavors of whatever it's cooked with, which makes it genuinely versatile across a wide range of dishes. The vine is vigorous and fast, climbing by tendrils that grip fence wire and mesh tightly. The leaves are large and cover fence space efficiently. The flowers are yellow and attract pollinators reliably, which benefits every other flowering crop growing in the garden at the same time. From seed to first edible harvest is approximately 70 to 80 days in warm weather. Loofah is heat demanding and needs consistent warmth to germinate and grow well, which makes it best suited to the southern half of the United States as a direct outdoor seed. In cooler northern climates, start seed indoors 3 to 4 weeks before transplant date and wait for settled warm weather before moving plants outside. The secondary harvest of the fully mature dried sponges is what makes loofah the most genuinely surprising vine on this list. Grow it for food all summer. Leave the last fruits of the season on the vine past the first frost to dry down completely. What you have at the end of the season is a homegrown, completely natural scrubbing sponge that most people who try one find is better than anything sold in a store. A food vine that produces a household product as a secondary harvest from the same plant. Nothing else on a fence does both. Vine 7. Bitter melon. Bitter melon is the vine most likely to divide opinion on this list, and that division is entirely about flavor. The fruit is bitter, genuinely, unmistakably bitter in a way that most Western palates haven't encountered in a food context. It is also one of the most widely consumed vegetables on Earth. Across South Asia, East Asia, West Africa, and the Caribbean communities representing billions of people, bitter melon is eaten weekly, sometimes daily, in dozens of different preparations. The bitterness is not considered a problem. It is the point. In those culinary traditions, bitter melon's specific flavor is as important and sought after as the sweetness of a ripe tomato or the earthiness of a good mushroom. The vine grows fast and covers fence space efficiently. From transplant to first harvest is roughly 60 days in warm conditions. The fruit develops quickly once the plant establishes, and it must be picked at the right stage. Bright green, firm, and fully shaped, but not yet soft or yellowing. A fruit left too long turns orange, splits open, and reveals brilliant red-coated seeds. At that stage, the flesh is no longer used for cooking, but the seed coating is sweet and entirely edible if you want to try it. For gardens in states with significant South Asian, Caribbean, or West African communities, which cover a substantial portion of the U.S., bitter melon grown at home has a ready audience in your own neighborhood. Fresh bitter melon commands consistently high prices in ethnic grocery stores because supply is almost entirely imported. A productive fence vine in a warm summer produces fruit faster than most households can use it, and the surplus has a local buyer market that almost no other vegetable on this list can match. 7 plants ready to climb a fence and produce food by the end of summer. But the fence needs to be set up correctly first, because a vine with nowhere to grip is just a plant leaning against a fence rather than a food wall. The most important element is horizontal structure at regular intervals. Fence posts give vertical support. Horizontal wires, mesh, or twine stretched tightly between those posts every 10 to 12 inches gives vines the anchoring points they need to climb steadily upward rather than piling up at the base. 12-gauge galvanized wire tensioned between screw-in vine eyes gives you a clean, long-lasting structure that handles the weight of mature vines without sagging. Garden netting stapled tightly to the fence face works well for lighter vines. Both cost very little to install and last for multiple seasons without attention. Soil preparation at the base of the fence matters more than most people account for. Fence lines often carry compacted, nutrient-poor soil from years of foot traffic nearby, runoff from the fence structure, and root competition from established grass or plants. Dig a trench 18 inches wide and 12 inches deep along the fence base. Backfill with a mix of existing soil and compost, 1 part compost to 2 parts soil. This takes 30 minutes per fence section and makes a visible difference in how fast and how well every vine establishes. Sun exposure determines which vine belongs on which fence. A south or west-facing fence gets the most direct sun and suits the heat-demanding varieties: chayote, yard-long bean, bitter melon, loofah. A north or east-facing fence gets more shade through the day and suits Malabar spinach specifically, which tolerates partial shade better than anything else on this list. Start with 1 vine per fence section. Space plants 18 to 24 inches apart along the fence base and let each one establish its own climbing path up the structure. They cover the space more evenly when each plant has its own territory rather than competing up the same line. If you haven't subscribed to Rickard Backyard Garden yet, do that right now before you click away. Every single week there's a new video at exactly this level of practical detail, growing knowledge that actually works in a real backyard. Button is right there: 7 vines, 1 fence, 1 growing season. Malabar spinach gives you greens from midsummer until frost. Scarlet Runner Beans feeding you and the pollinators at the same time. Yard-long beans in continuous production from June onward. Hyacinth beans make the fence as beautiful as it is productive. Chayote covers 30 feet of fence and hangs with 50 fruits from a single plant. Loofah gives you food and a household product from the same vine. Bitter melon fills a niche that most backyard gardeners leave completely empty. None of these require specialist knowledge. None of them need expensive inputs. What they need is a fence, something to climb, decent soil at the base, and the decision to stop walking past that vertical space as if it doesn't count. That fence is not a boundary. It is the most underused growing surface in your entire backyard. Every summer you plant nothing on it is a full growing season you hand away for free. This is the summer you stop doing that. Subscribe to Rickard Backyard Garden. New video every week, practical growing knowledge for real backyards, explained clearly and without filler. See you in the next one.